Welcome back, everyone. Cameron, Audi C7 owners, as usual. Doing a video. I actually didn't plan on doing this one this soon, but since I'm having to deal with a punctured hole in my heat exchanger, which if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out our heat exchanger install video for the 4.0 turbo heat exchanger from Merc Racing. It'll be up soon if it isn't already up, but you'll see what I'm talking about. But basically, I'll just show you real quick. Installing this thing, doing some R&D, we find out that, hey, there's not enough clearance between the night vision camera and the heat exchanger when it's mounted, and punched a tiny hole in the heat exchanger, and now fluid is leaking out. So we're waiting on a replacement one of those. So I figure while the car is down for a few days while I wait for that to show up, I am going to install our Driveshaft carrier from JXB Performance. I'm honestly just doing this to beat Thornton Dykes. If you don't know him, check out Slow A6 on Instagram. He's got a pretty not slow A6, and he said he was going to try and get his install video up before mine, so I'm out here out of spite just trying to get this done before he does. So I'm going to show you guys how to install this thing. I won't be able to drive it and give you my impressions on the car yet because I'll have to wait for my heat exchanger to show up, but I'll at least be able to run you guys through the install of this. To do this install, you are going to need some special tools. You're going to need a Dremel with a cutting wheel, or something else to cut through a thin piece of metal, because that's how you're going to remove the OEM carrier. Nothing crazy bulky, because you're going to have to get up there by your drive shaft, but something you can control easily, because you're not going to want to cut too deep. But other than that, you're just going to need typical hand tools, and yeah, that's about it. One thing, you're going to be underneath the center of the car, so make sure you not only have reliable jack stands, but do something else to protect yourself. I've got my ramps under my wheels back here, just because I'm going to be under there working a lot, and don't want to deal with the potential of my jack stands failing and crushing me under my car. So take extra safety precautions here. Make sure you have some glasses that you can wear to protect yourself, because you will be cutting metal underneath the car. And let's get to the DIY. Okay guys, the first step to this whole process is to remove your exhaust from basically the mid-muffler back, because you're gonna have to get underneath your mid-muffler. If you don't know how to remove your exhaust, then you can check out our DIY video on installing our Send exhaust. I was hoping I could do it without removing every piece. I was like, I'll just remove the mid-muffler, but there was no room to move any of the pipes. So you can see my downpipes laying down there. I got all of my exhaust out, and I'm gonna try and show you what we're looking for here. So give me a second. All right, if I get the light on it, you see that right there? You see the little circle around the drive shaft? That is our drive shaft carrier. There's that heat shield underneath it. And we, on the next step here, we're gonna be removing that heat shield. There's a few, I think it's 10mm plastic nuts holding it on there. We're gonna be removing that, dropping it down, and then we'll get into removing the OEM carrier. If you are trying to look for a frame of reference, you see that little crossbar? It's just on the engine side of that crossbar. All right, so I apologize if the audio sucks. So we had these little screws hold on these skid plates. We don't have to remove the skid plate completely. We have to do 1, 2, 3 of these on this side, 1, 2, 3 of these on this side, and that'll loosen up to where you got room to back this heat shield out from under it. Now we have these weird little screw things here, and I think these might hopefully be 10mm as well. Let's see, they don't have real good edges to them, so let's see here. All right, so they are 10mm as well. So we're gonna remove these, and now this heat shield should be able to come out. It might take a little bit of working, a little bit of bending. You guys, I need a lift. All right, so we're gonna pull this out. Look at all that dirt. So once we get that out, we can pop this like that. It's gonna bend, it's metal, it does it. Same thing, slide that out. And now this heat shield comes out, and we're gonna move it off to the side for now. And now this exposes our actual drive shaft carrier. Let's see if I can do it. So, here's what our drive shaft carrier looks like, and you can see it's really thin, not very sturdy. It's meant for comfort. You got your bearing right here, your carrier. What we have to do is get a Dremel, and we have to cut through this metal here. And you need to be very careful not to cut in to the soft spot in here. You don't want to cut this. You just want to cut the metal carrier. So we're going to probably come up here and do a cut here, and then do a cut here, and then pry this thing apart, and then we'll be able to actually unbolt it from each side here and slide it off of the drive shaft. I'm going to look up the instructions. I don't know if we're going to have to actually brace this, the drive shaft itself. I feel like that would probably be a good idea to get the lift in, or the jack in here, to put something up just so that this doesn't fall. We don't want to put any undue stress here. But yeah, so let me go get my stuff and get ready to cut this, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're about to make the cuts on our OEM drive shaft carrier. Like I said, where there's this bottom band, and then there's a metal band that goes around. So there's actually 2 layers of metal between this band and this band that we have to cut. There is an outer rubber piece here, and if you cut into that rubber piece, it's not the end of the world because we're going to have to trim that off anyways. But then there's your bearing here. You don't want to cut into your actual bearing. As you can see here, ours isn't too loose. It's not bad. There's not a whole lot of movement as it is, so ours isn't terribly worn out, but we're still going to go ahead and put this JXB Performance carrier in and really stiffen things up. So make sure you have eye protection on, make sure you have gloves on, and do this very slow. Make sure you're going very methodically through this when you make these cuts, and just be very, very careful. Alright, so I'm making my way through it. You guys get the gist of what I'm doing here. I'm going to turn the camera off so I'm not making or wasting tons of film time, and I will put the camera on when we're starting to tear this apart. Okay guys, so as you can see, we got this piece cut from here. It's still a little attached over here, but it's separated from each of these arms. So now we're going to remove these bolts to drop these arms out. That'll give us enough room to just pull this out. This is the rubber part, and we're going to have to trim that away as well. But for now, let's get these legs off. These are 13mm bolts. And you can see the drive shaft starting to come down. You do not have to support the drive shaft. It's fine to hang right here. It's perfectly safe. I mean, obviously, if you want to support it, that's not going to be a bad thing. It's just going to put more stuff in your way in here. You will not be reusing the OEM bolts, so you can just go ahead and get rid of all those. All right, so now we have this. We just pry that over and out. That's what that all looks like. So now you've got this, your actual bearing here, and you've got this rubber piece. So you see there's an outer edge here, then there is this inner like kind of tube, and then you see this inner piece here. That's your bearing. You don't want to cut that, but this rubber is attached to the bearing. It's molded on there. So we need to shave away this rubber, and we're basically going to leave like a little rib on the inside. I'm going to try it first just with a regular razor blade, because in this instance, guys, you want to do a very little at a time. So we're going to get this razor blade here, and it's cutting it just fine. Now it's a razor blade. This is metal. This isn't going to hurt anything. You're probably going to nick the metal and whatnot, but just be very, very careful. Once again, working with blades and your drive shaft here. So it's kind of sitting there. We're going to do that. I'm going to do another one right next to it. And that's really tough right there. This razor blade isn't going through the outer edge there. So what I might do here is try and get in and cut this. Oh, this is the metal. This is like a plastic metal or plastic ring here that just kind of attach this whole thing to the bearing. So we're gonna get that rip started, and we're just gonna tear this off all the way around. And then once we get this torn off, now we can trim this rubber up. This right here is just like a hard, I don't know, it might be aluminum inside of it, or I'm not sure, but it's definitely more than hard plastic. So now we have this. Be really careful here, definitely wear gloves, and just trim this rubber off all the way around. Just like this. This makes it really easy at being on the bearing. You can literally just grab, pull, just don't cut your fingers. The bushings from JXB Performance are designed to work with a little bit of this rib of rubber left on this bearing here. So we got a little bit, there's a little bit of excess here. I'm going to try and just trim it up just a little bit, make it more uniform all the way around. Just get any big pieces that are overhanging. All right, let me get one more little piece of this out. And it helps if you have a fresh blade. The sharper it is, the smoother this is gonna go. All right, so this is prepped. And now we are ready to install our JXB Performance Driveshaft carrier. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pick the bushings that you want to install, and it's going to be in two pieces. You're going to want to go ahead and put your bushings into the driveshaft carrier. There's a little, you see this little lip right here. Let me get something to point at here. You see this little lip here on the back of the actual bearing. One of the lips of the bushings is going to catch into that and grab it, and then the other one's going to grab onto this edge, and it's going to seat in there. Remember, it's designed to work with this little bit of rubber ridge there. So get them into the carrier itself, make sure they're good and flush in both pieces, that way you don't have to fumble with multiple pieces in here. And we're going to put one over the top, the other one, we're going to get the screw started, and then we'll get it tightened up and we'll bolt it up to here. Okay guys, we're gonna prepping everything to go back onto the car now. So we're getting our actual carrier out, we're getting our bushings in. I have both the street density bushings and I have the track bushings. I'm going to start with the street ones, and then after that I'm going to move on to the track ones afterwards and do it again, and I'm gonna let you guys know what I think about the difference between both of these. So like I said, get these set in to your actual carrier, make sure it's nice and flush, and they sit in there pretty well. They're not going to move around on you as long as you don't bump them too much. That way you don't have to mess with this underneath the car. Obviously this is how it's going to go on, but one thing to note, the side that has all the writing, and this even says driveshaft carrier upper, so that's the upper piece, front, lower, front. When they say front, front means the engine side. So when this goes in the car, the writing needs to face the front of the vehicle, towards your engine, okay? Real quick, forgot to talk about your screws that actually connect your carrier. You've got two of them. These are 6mm Allen heads, and so you need something that's gonna allow this to go all the way through the carrier and connect. So make sure you have the right tool, something long enough to actually get in there. And I'll show you what I'm using here momentarily once I find it. This is my setup, and this works perfectly. I just got a set of Allen sockets from Harbor Freight, you know, typical cheap stuff, but it works. It allows me to get all the way up into the groove and get these completely seated. Okay, everybody, we are back under the car, and we are getting ready to connect our driveshaft carrier to the car. So remember, the writing faces the front of the vehicle, so you can see my writing here. I'm going to turn that around because we are doing this from the driver's side of the car. I'm going to get this pressed on, make sure that this gets set up on the carrier or on the driveshaft bearing really well here. I might have to trim this a little bit more. Let's see here.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to trim this up a little bit more. So let me do that and we'll be right back. Okay guys, so this time I'm using an X-Acto knife and I'm kind of bracing against a drive shaft and getting the blade right up against this rubber ridge, and I'm just holding it against the drive shaft as I rotate the bearing and trimming this up, making it nice and uniform, getting it filed down to where there's just that little bit of a ridge of rubber. Just file down any really high spots with this rubber or with this razor blade. Alright, I think that should hopefully do it. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so once again, writing facing front. Okay, that looks like it's fitting really well there. Okay, so we got that piece on. Now let's grab the other piece here. Get this, wipe it off, got some dirt under here. Going to get this piece connected. This is a little tricky to do by yourself. One tricky thing is I can't just let go of this top. Well, maybe. I'm gonna try and get a bolt threaded through. One thing that I didn't mention on when we were over by the table is that you should use at least blue Loctite on any bolts from here on out. There's a lot of vibration through here, and you want to make sure that these bolts don't work their way out. All right, so we're gonna try this here, see how this works. Try and get this thing started a little bit. If we can get this started, then we can play around with the fitment of it. What the heck here? There we go. Let me get the other one. I'll get it started. And then we can make sure that we get these things seated correctly onto the actual bearing itself. Okay, so we got the screw started. So now we just need to work on getting these fitted correctly, making sure they're over the lips correctly so that we hold onto this bearing correctly for the car. All the correctlies. Let me take y'all's light source for a second, making sure we're good back here. All right, it's at a point where I think if I tighten it down, we're gonna be good to go. So that is what I'm going to do. But I forgot my socket wrench, so I'll be right back. Okay, we are back here. We are going to tighten these up. 6mm Allen, and you're gonna not just tighten one side down completely. You want to go back and forth. A few turns on one side, then go back, and a few turns on the other. Go back and forth and make sure that these seat down equally. Just like you would do on your wheel, you don't go in a circle around the bolt pattern. You make sure that you go, in a star pattern. So just a little bit on each side. And as you do this, try and make sure that the bushings are seated correctly. And there are specific torque settings or torque specs for these bolts, and we'll cover those in a little bit. Okay, So that is all on there. I'm going to just double check, make sure everything looks seated properly, and it does. All right, cool. So next we are going to mount the feet to the actual car. And there, once again, are torque settings for those, and I'll go over those in a bit. But we need to get this mounted up. Once this is mounted in place, we'll torque the feet down, and then we'll torque the bolt holding the two halves together. Okay, so we went ahead and we tightened both sides together all the way, and we got it torqued down. Now we're going to install they're actually isolation dampers that go onto the feet. That's what we'll call these, the feet of the actual drive shaft carrier. So what you're going to do is you're going to take them and they slide right over the ends like that. Doesn't matter if the text is facing up or down. We'll go ahead and just make them the same way. So you have that. And then you've got a bolt with a large washer, which is going to go on the bottom. And there's a small washer, which we are going to put up here. Make sure you have blue Loctite on your bolt, because you're going to want this stuff to stay, obviously. So we're just going to go ahead, push that through, and we're going to set the other washer on top, and the actual isolation damper will hold that bolt in there. It's a good solid tight fit. Go get the other ones. Push this through here. Okay, and so now we just got to push this up into place, and we will start these by hand. Get these started. So, full disclosure, when I installed these earlier, my dumbass got caught up in just talking and filming, and I completely glossed over this, and I installed these wrong. I actually took these off and I put the bolts through on the bottom, and I was just rushing through it and being an idiot. And I installed these like an idiot and posted a picture on the Audi C7 owners group, and immediately got corrected by some people on there that was like, oh, you might want to go check that out. And even Jay at JXB, I sent him a text going, oh my god, my dumb ass installed this wrong. He's like, yeah, you got no excuse, because we've got a bunch of install videos on our YouTube video, and I looked at theirs and I must have just glossed over it when I was watching it. So full disclosure, I was an idiot at first, but luckily I didn't put the exhaust back together yet, and this is an easy fix for me. So we got this all together, and now we just need to torque this back down to 19 Newton meters, or 14.5 foot-pounds. So let me get this set up. All right. That looks a lot better. And I even noticed when I was trying to put the heat shield on the first time I put these on that something didn't feel right trying to get the heat shield in over the actual over these isolation dampers. I was like, man, that just doesn't seem like it fits the right way. And I was like, but I guess maybe it's just different for the C7. Should have listened to myself and double checked it then. Oh well. You live, you learn. Alright, these are torqued down, like I said, 14.5 foot-pounds or 19 Newton meters, And so we got everything correctly installed now, and now we can go ahead and put the heat shield back into place and eventually put the exhaust back into place. One other thing that I do want to bring up, let me get my light pushed back here and move this here. Something for you guys that might be a little bit easier when it comes to installing this. Instead of doing what I did and removing your entire exhaust, and it worked out better for me for filming, but for you guys that are just doing this at home, it might be better to even drop this down and just remove this brace here and then unhook your mufflers and just lower the exhaust. You know, it'll still kind of be in the way, but it'll be probably a lot better than removing the entire midsection back of your exhaust. So whatever you think is easiest for you. You've got you're gonna need some triple squares to remove this brace. You're gonna have to undo these two, actually these are already done. You have to undo these 10 millimeter plastic nuts here and bring this down so you can get access to all the bolts, remove it, and then you can lower your exhaust. So whatever you think works easiest for you. Anyways, now that we have this properly installed, you are complete with your JXB driveshaft carrier installation. Can't wait to get it on the road and see how this thing allows me to, can't wait to see how it changes our launches. We've got the TCU tuned by Burt Gurd, so we're launching at near around 3,000 RPMs, and this should stiffen everything up because we've already got all our drivetrain inserts and things like that. So this is the last piece of stiffening up the drivetrain. So looking forward to this. Want to thank JXB Performance and Jay Billington for hooking the channel up so that we could get this installed and show it to you guys. And we will go through, and like I said, we're gonna do the street bushings first. We'll do the track bushings afterwards, and we'll drop another video later on letting you know exactly what we think about each of them.